Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. My guest today is Tiffany Toombs. She is a badass. She's a mindset reprogrammer, an NLP trainer, a speaker, author, podcaster, just like I said, a badass all around. Her story is incredible. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Honestly, we were talking offline. This podcast has been rescheduled so many times. I'm just so happy to have you on. Let's get right into it. Let's start with the background. Let's get the Tiffany story on how you got started in this entrepreneurial journey and helping people.
So I think my entrepreneurial journey has, I was always just destined to be an entrepreneur. I always just kind of knew. I remember the town that I grew up in, it was like a fairly small town, but every year they would have this classic car show on Labor Day weekend. And I used to beg my parents. I was like, this is the perfect time for me to set up a lemonade stand. I'm like, firstly, there's like tens of thousands of extra people in town. And secondly, who's not going to buy lemonade from a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl? And they were like, so the entrepreneurial side's always been there. And then the helping people side, I've always been somebody who's very intuitive about what other people are feeling. And it's probably come through my own journey. As you know, I was abused by my stepmom growing up, who was actually a domestic violence survivor herself. And I hid what had happened for a really long time growing up from my mom and my stepdad, because they had struggled with depression and anxiety. And I didn't want to add to the weight of that. And so I became like this super emotionally strong person, or at least back then, that's what I thought it was, by suppressing all this emotion and making it look like I was totally okay. Obviously picked up some bad beliefs and some bad behaviors along the way. But yeah, the abuse really started around 3. She started locking me in closets and burning me with curling irons. And then when I was 7, and this is where I really developed one of the major beliefs that haunted me most of my life, was that I was performing. I've always been a natural performer, a dancer, all of that kind of stuff. And I was just putting on a play in our backyard for my cousins. And she picked me up and put me in the car and told me that she was sick of me being too loud and standing out too much. And she drove me to the outskirts of town and was going to leave me for dead. So at 7 years old, I begged for my life. She let me off with a warning. I don't think she actually ever had intentions of leaving me there, although she had made threats to my parents and things, or to my mom and my stepdad, that they would never see me again if X, Y, and Z didn't happen. So maybe she would have followed through, who knows. But I created this belief that I wasn't worthy and that it wasn't safe to be in the spotlight. And so I really shrunk back and stepped out of the entrepreneurial journey for a while. Still kind of had side hustles and other things that I would do, but I didn't want to be in front of a crowd. And that all kind of came to a head. I'm a big believer that if you don't deal with your stuff, the universe will just keep closing door after door after door and, push you down the proverbial mountain until you deal with it. So I was living in Australia when that happened. I'd been dating someone for 3 years. I found out I was pregnant. A couple hours later, I thought he was actually away on a work trip. And I found out that he was actually with his girlfriend in another state, another girlfriend in another state. And I hit rock bottom. Turns out he was a compulsive liar and was lying about everything from how much money he was making so that he could go to the pub every day after work and spend money, to, he would say that he had the best bacon and eggs for breakfast and didn't really eat. So all of this is coming out and I'm getting sicker and sicker, super stressed, can't eat, can't sleep. My body just decided, you know what, this isn't the right time to be carrying a baby, miscarried the baby, and then hit a whole new emotional rock bottom that I didn't even know was possible. And at that point in time, I was also too embarrassed to tell anybody what was going on. Everyone knew about the cheating, and I was so embarrassed and mortified that I didn't know any of that was happening. And it was so obvious to other people that I couldn't tell anybody about the miscarriage. So I didn't actually talk about it for 6 months to a year. I didn't tell my parents until about 6 months later, and I didn't tell anybody else until about a year after.
So you dealt with that all alone?
Yeah, I was totally alone in that. I did tell him, And his way of dealing with it was, well, let's just make another baby. And I was like, what? Just to kind of show you the kind of person he was.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where I was meditating all the time. I was doing yoga. Me and my dog would walk the beach at sunset for hours just for solitude and trying to fix it. And nothing was changing. So I was standing on a corner in downtown Melbourne one day, and I saw this taxi coming, and I thought, I can make all of this go away with just one step. And mentally I committed to it. Call it divine intervention or whatever you want. When I went to take the step, I just couldn't. My feet would not move. It's like they were in cement blocks. And I just saw these faces flashing in front of my face in my mind. My parents, some of my friends, and then people I'd never met before, people I didn't know. And I just took that as a sign that my story wasn't over yet, that I still had more in this journey to do. And that kind of brought me to my own healing process. At that point in time, I was in the fitness industry. So I was already helping people feel comfortable in their own skin, which had an element of mindset with it as well, but it was more the fitness side of things. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I transitioned solely into the mindset side of things, especially after I found NLP, and it had such a profound impact on my life.
Crazy story. And before we even get into NLP, I mean, there's so many people who go through way less and use it as an excuse to not do things, or that the world's against them, or they can't achieve success. What's been your key? Like, what's made you see past that and use it as a strength, or use it as a way to find some sort of inner strength to keep going, when most people would find less and just use it as a way to stop everything?
So I think, from the abuse perspective, because I was so young, I think I just thought that was normal. Like, logically, I knew it wasn't, but it was my life. And so it was just normal. In fact, it wasn't until after the miscarriage and the almost suicide that when I went to see a therapist, that she was like, well, of course you were abused as a kid. Like, what would you call somebody, like if it was another random kid being locked in closets and all of those things happening to them, what would you call it? And I was like, abuse. And she was like, well, why wouldn't it be for you? And I was like, I don't know, because it happened to me and I survived and I'm not overly damaged. I'm a functioning member of society. So I think from the childhood perspective, I just didn't know any different at that time. For the miscarriage and everything else, and how I look at obstacles now, is I honestly believe that we, whether you believe that our soul chose it before we got here, or the God or the universe or whoever it is that you believe in, gave us the challenges to like unlock the resources that we need. So if life was like a video game, the level that we're on, we have to unlock certain resources that allows us to go to the next level. And so the obstacles that we face are really helping us learn and gain the tools that we need so that we can live our purpose and share the message that we're meant to share with the world.
I like that. I like the way you phrased that there. So getting into it, what is NLP and why is it so important?
So NLP, most people know of it, but they probably don't know that it's called NLP. It's what Tony Robbins is trained in. It stands for Neurolinguistic Programming. And what it really is it's the understanding of how the mind is wired, how the mind stores emotions, memories, beliefs, both good and bad, and then how the words that we use to communicate. So when I'm talking to myself, when I'm talking to you, how those words combine with the wiring of the brain to create our behaviors, our habits, and our actions. And so the reason that it's so important is because a lot of people fail to make long-term change because they're not working with their biology. They're working against their biology. And then they conclude that, things like what Freud said about our unconscious mind is like this dark, scary thing that's working against us. They start to believe that. And they think, they develop almost that victim mentality, in that they think that everything's happening to stop them from moving forward, when really we learn not to touch the hot stove by touching the hot stove. So those challenges give us the understandings that we need. So for people to truly make change, they have to embrace NLP to some degree, because where people want to make change, let's say, in every new year, people are like, I want to be healthier this year. So I'm going to go to the gym more. I'm going to do this behavior more. And then I'm going to eat healthier food or less junk food. I'm going to do this behavior less. The thing is that our behaviors are just symptoms of our belief systems. And so until we address the belief system, we're never really going to change the behavior. It's like weeding the garden and taking like your kitchen scissors and cutting the stem of the weed where it meets the soil, so that for a couple days your garden looks pretty and without any weeds, but the root is still there. So it's going to come back.
Surface level.
Absolutely. And that's, I find, pop culture and social media and things have made it easy to do the surface level work. Even I talk a lot about self-love, and it's become,
I don't know how to respond to that.
And gratitude practices. Siri wanted to jump in there.
Always fun to have another guest on.
That's right. Like I talk a lot about gratitude practices and self-love, and I found that, social media and pop culture have kind of twisted it into this thing that is still surface level. It's we're going to do it at the easiest level, but we're never actually going to look at the skeletons in the closet. We're not going to forgive ourselves for past transgressions. We're not going to really accept every aspect of who we are. And then people wonder why things don't change. And they just say that, gratitude's BS, or, self-love is just red wine and bubble baths, and that's it. When it's so much deeper and so much more than that.
And how does it come into play from an entrepreneurial level, from a business level?
It is, as you know, it is so much more important for an entrepreneur, because like the entrepreneur faces so many obstacles in itself that is crazy. I had a client reach out to me yesterday who's going through my NLP training, so to become an NLP certified coach. And like entrepreneurs receive a lot of unsolicited advice from friends and family. I'm sure you've had that experience. When I started my coaching business, I had friends and family and my dad and, people telling me, you'd make a great receptionist. Nobody's going to pay you to talk about their feelings. And so she received this message saying, I think you're being scammed. Like, I've done some research. It doesn't seem like you should be paying what you're paying for this program. And I know you didn't ask for my opinion, so it probably doesn't mean much to you, but I just thought I'd let you know where I stand. And while I can't be excited with you, I'll support you through it. And she reached out to me and she just said, I have no idea what to do with this. And she hasn't done any of the trainings yet, so she doesn't have any of those tools. And so entrepreneurs have so many other obstacles to face that they don't need to be battling themselves every day. And so when you understand how to program your mind, how to talk to yourself, how to talk to others, how to, whether you call it manifesting or create the life that you want, like when you have those tools and you know how to set yourself up for success, it takes away a major battle so that you can focus on the other things that are going to pop up and attempt to derail you.
And you've coached a lot of business owners, right, on how to unpack their mind a little bit and how to get better. What seems to be the part that trips entrepreneurs up the most?
So most people think it's like either a not good enough or I'll fail, like this fear of failure. I would say one of the underlying beliefs that has come up with 95% of my entrepreneur clients or business owner clients, and about 90% of my client base are those people, is this like need to be in struggle. Like I can only be innovative or creative or motivated or productive if I'm in struggle. So it's only when I don't know how I'm going to keep the lights on this month, or how I'm going to pay rent this month, or how I'm going to eat tomorrow, that they can like come out with something. And so what I find is a lot of entrepreneurs will, as they start to climb that proverbial mountain, will just throw themselves back down. So one of the tools that I give them while we go through the process of clearing out the emotional baggage for the now, so they don't get into that self-sabotage, is where you are today. Like if you made $10,000 in sales today, that becomes your new baseline. That becomes zero, right? make it so that that $10,000 is not easily accessible to you. You know, make sure that there's some liquid just in case something happens. But at the same time, put it in a place where you can't be like, oh, you know, let's go celebrate and have a $2,000 night out or whatever. Because the self-sabotage, it just sneaks up in so many ways. I've got another client right now who's in the process of transitioning out of helping her dad run his businesses and into her own speaking and coaching career. And all these lawsuits have popped up in his business, and, you know, challenges with employees and whatever. And she's like, I have to stop like working on my ebook, and I can't do a live video every day. And I'm just going to have to put my coaching practice on hold for now because I've got all this other stuff. And that's what happens is, I call it the quickening. Every time you're about to level up, something pops up to distract you. And so many people, because it shows up in like, it doesn't always show up as social media or nights out. It can show up as things like lawsuits or haters or chargebacks or, you know, whatever it is to distract you. And so many people get sucked in that they don't realize it until they have these tools to really see like, oh, this is just a form of self-sabotage. And even if, so I talked to that client just before and I said, even if you write one sentence a day for your ebook, you're still doing something. And you can write a sentence a day. You can probably write a paragraph a day. And she was like, oh yeah, I didn't even think of it that way. And so at least while she's going through this other stuff, she's not totally putting on the emergency brake on her business.
And why do you think I mean, you've also spoken to other professionals. Why do you think it is that entrepreneurs in general are harder on themselves than other professions?
I mean, entrepreneurs for the most part, they tend to be misunderstood, right? Like they're the pioneers, the innovators, the visionaries who people don't see what they see until it's been built. I mean, I read a book last year on the Airbnb story. Like they went through so many different angel investors. It was like they applied to like 10 different companies for angel investing, and they got laughed out of there so many times. And nobody could see the vision. And now it's like a $6 billion business that's, you know, as soon as you go to book a trip somewhere, you think Airbnb over hotels now. And so I think for entrepreneurs, it can be easy to start to question your own vision, no matter how strong your gut feeling is that you have to do that thing. When nobody else sees it and nobody else supports you, and you're eating ramen noodles for the second year in a row kind of thing, it can be easy to get down on yourself. And I think we're just programmed differently. And then I think, you know, that's kind of your true entrepreneur. And then there's kind of this second wave of entrepreneurs who aren't buying the status quo anymore of graduate high school, go to college, get married, get a job and work there and collect Social Security. There's people who want more freedom, and we're starting to see that that's possible. And they're still holding on to things that other people have told them. Like the most important thing for anybody to know is that the limiting beliefs that you have were put in your brain between the ages of 0 and 7. So it's not like, you know, you decided to think this yesterday. That seed was planted a long time ago. You've just been watering it your entire life, which also means that it didn't come from you. It came from somebody else and their experience, right? If I had have listened to my dad who had a failed business, and so when I went to start mine, he wanted to protect me, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now.
It could also be, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is that it's also a lonely journey for an entrepreneur, right? So many people may not relate to us, and that's why we find all these masterminds and communities, because we want to be around people who understand the highs and lows with us.
Yeah, and that's why with everything that both myself and my fiance do is we look to create that community, because I mean, I said on a call with my clients last night, you have a community here. And sometimes the person who supports your journey the most is that person on social media that you've never actually met in real life. Some of my best friends are those people. You know, the people in my wedding party are those people, the people who supported me when nobody else really understood me. So it's important to have that external community, and then also to have the tools within yourself to, when those thoughts come up, to have strategies to overcome them, or just to totally let go of that emotional baggage, so that those thoughts don't pop up with the same frequency and the same intensity that they used to.
You had a great post on Facebook the other day about dealing with criticism or dealing with haters. An incredible post, and anyone should go follow Tiffany. After I'll put a link to your Facebook page or whatever. We'll figure out how to promote you in a second. But how would you recommend people deal with the haters, with the negative criticism?
That has been probably one of the biggest challenges of my journey. So it's something I know well. And I think for a lot of people that becomes it, especially when the haters start coming from your own camp, when those people within start turning. So I'll speak to both of them separately. For the people who don't really know you, or, you know, they're on the outside looking in and they think that they know you and they decide to start hating. Firstly, like the first thing that I ask myself, I'm not sure if you were talking about the picture that I put up or the email that I received.
Both. So
Okay.
I saw the email one, and then the picture that came after it as a response pretty much to the email was great.
So yes, thank you. So, I mean, the email that I got was from an ex-business partner who 2 years later still hasn't moved on. Right. And so for me, it's like, how bad does your life have to be that even 2 years later, or even if it's a month later, after you have a disagreement or a run-in with somebody, that you take your precious time, like time is our most valuable resource, and you spend that sending negativity towards somebody else? Like, your life has to be pretty miserable for that. And in NLP, there's this concept of perception is projection. And what it says is that everyone that we meet is a reflection of us in some way. So if I say, Jason, you're awesome, I can only see how awesome you are because there's a level of awesome in me. Or I can only see that, you know, Grant Cardone or Frank Kern or any of the other guests you've had on this show, I can only see that they're successful because I've had a level of success in myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't see it in them. And the same is true on the other side. If somebody is triggering me, or I'm getting pissed off because somebody else is having success, it's showing me a part of me that I don't like. And so it's really an invitation for me to go and heal myself. Because we live in a society of instant gratification, and there's been like a societal level to a degree, especially in the US, of pointing fingers at somebody else and not totally taking responsibility for us, right? We rely on the government, or we rely on the media. We rely on so many other people that we don't actually take responsibility for our lives. So then we have no power. And we don't see that we have the power to heal those things and to change those emotions in us. So then we put it on somebody else. In terms of the haters in your own camp, so like that client of mine that I mentioned got the email from her friend, it comes back to, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. I'm sure you've heard that before plenty, both on this podcast and social media and other places. So what doesn't often get talked about is that you make up those people's average as well. So if you decide to join a mastermind or start a business or improve your life in any way, whether it's your health and fitness, going to see a counselor, hiring a coach, whatever, you start to raise your average. And when we raise our average, we step outside of our comfort zone. Now, you've done that willingly and consciously, and you've thought about the pros and cons. As you start to level up, you raise the average of the other people because you make up part of their average. And so they didn't make the choice to step outside of their comfort zone, which means they go into a fight or flight because that's what they feel like is happening. They're being dragged kicking and screaming out of their comfort zone. And so they either run away and they just disappear from your life, or they feel the need to fight you. Now, consciously, it doesn't make sense to them why they're in this fight or flight mode. So they'll mask it in whatever it is. I want to keep you safe. I want to make sure you're protected. I want to make sure somebody doesn't rip you off. I want to make sure that you don't feel like a failure when you crash and burn. So they're fighting against their own growth, and they're projecting it outwards on you.
I love it. So smart. So smart. How much of this game, I mean, you're a successful entrepreneur. You've worked with a lot of successful entrepreneurs. How much of this game is mental?
Like 99%. Like, I mean, and I know it's like a cliche meme, but it honestly, like, everything starts in thought, literally everything. So when you have a thought, our bodies release a hormone. That hormone bathes every single cell in our body and causes us to feel an emotion. So if I wake up in the morning and my first thought is negative, then I'm spiking my body with stress hormones, which means I'm going to feel stressed and anxious. That's going to create more thoughts of stress and anxiety. So literally everything starts in thought. So if you can't manage your thoughts, it's going to be a long uphill journey for you.
So I've also spoken to a lot of business owners, and the number one thing that always comes across is imposter syndrome. And I'm sure in your coaching, you've coached a lot of people through it. What are some ways? First, what is imposter syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then let's get a bit tactical. How can entrepreneurs or business owners or professionals get over it?
I actually just created a worksheet on this because it has been coming up so much recently. So I can give you the link to that worksheet as well. So imposter syndrome typically comes from one of three fears. Either if I try, I'll fail, which has a little bit of like not worthy, not good enough mixed in. People will reject me, so nobody will want what I'm doing. And that reflects back on me. I'll be rejected, and then it's not safe. And so then because that's the underlying belief, we get these thoughts popping up of, who do you think you are? Or nobody's going to want to listen to you, or you're not good enough to do this. You don't know enough. We live in a culture where people love to accumulate information, but nobody really implements. And what I often see is that people think, and this has actually been studied as well, there's a confidence knowledge curve. People think that the more knowledge they have, the more confident they'll be. But the only way to build confidence is by doing something and taking action. So what studies have actually shown is that the more knowledge you accumulate, the more you realize you don't know, and the less confidence you have. So it's better, whatever level you're at, just to implement and then go back and learn more of what you need to. But you also don't really know what you need to learn until you start taking action on something, right? So like if you put up a funnel, you don't know if you need to learn LinkedIn ads or Facebook ads or blah, 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 until you know if the funnel will even convert. So my fiance and I, we run a course to show coaches how to build 6-figure influence organically. And people are like, nah, I just get me to the paid ads. And I'm like, if you can't do it organically, if you can't attract people to you with your message organically, you're just going to be throwing a whole lot of money into the wind because you haven't gotten your messaging down. So that's where imposter syndrome comes from. There's a couple questions that I get people to ask themselves, and this is on the worksheet, but the questions are, so firstly, what evidence do you have to prove that you are an imposter? Because we tend to just accept whatever thoughts we have as being true. Like my brain runs my body, so if I think something, it must be true. So what evidence do you have that you're not good enough? And list, like, just create a huge list, as many things as you can think of. Some people are like, well, I went to jail, or I was abused as a kid, or I grew up with nothing, blah, blah, blah. Write all of that down. And then the second question is, are there other people out there who have that same evidence as you, who've been to jail, grew up poor, don't have the bachelor's degree, PhD, master's, whatever, they've never run a business before, whatever it is, that are the real deal and have been successful, have been able to help people? I mean, you look at people like Damon John, you look at people like Frank Kern, who's lost it all a couple times, Grant Cardone, Zach Babcock, like all these people who have a huge level of success and were poor. I mean, Tony Robbins lived in his car at one point in time. One of my mentors, Marshall Silver, his family he had 10 brothers and sisters, and his family lived in a house with no running water and no electricity. And they would go days on end without eating because they were so poor. And now he's a multimillionaire. So it just shows that just because you have these things doesn't make you an imposter when we can see that other people have it, because the unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between me and you. So if me and you have the same backgrounds and you've gone on to have this incredible success, my unconscious mind goes, oh, well, that's not a reason anymore. Then the third question to ask yourself is, what evidence do I have to prove that I am good enough, or that I am good, the real deal? What happens with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs is they typically only hear from their clients when something's gone wrong, right? You only hear from your clients if they're not getting the leads, or the leads aren't closing, or whatever it is. And so what we focus on expands. So because we're just focused on all these problems that are coming in and fires that we need to put out, we forget that all the people who aren't calling are typically happy. So as entrepreneurs, we need to become better, and even salespeople, we need to become better at being proactive and going out and getting those testimonials. So when I work with a client, I'll reach out to them the next day and say, hey, how are you feeling? 99% of the time I feel amazing. I have more energy. I feel lighter. I was able to close this huge deal, whatever. I screenshot that and I save it in a specific album on my phone, so that if any self-doubt ever pops up, or I am hit with a day where it's just like fire after fire after fire that I have to put out, I can go back to that folder and remember all the good that I'm doing. So be proactive in asking for those things. And then the 1% of the time when it's negative, well, now I've come to that person and I can solve their problem proactively, rather than letting them fester and sit with it, so that they're happy in the end as well.
I love that. Love that. Love that idea about on the phone. I'm going to take that. I want to talk about your morning. Do you have a morning ritual and a nighttime ritual?
I do. I'm a big fan of routine.
Do you mind sharing your morning routine?
For sure. So for me, I believe the evening routine is actually more important than the morning routine. The evening routine sets you up for sleep success. So it sets you up to have a good sleep, so that you can actually get up and do your morning routine on time. So my morning routine, I have a custom made journal that I created. It's like that thick. There's a page for every day of the year. And in the morning, I write down my I am statements. So 5 I am affirmations. I write down my intentions for the day. So who is it that I want to show up as today? I do some form of meditation. Most mornings, it's been a little cold here in Dallas lately, but most mornings I go out and I walk, and I listen to an audiobook as well while I'm walking, and then have breakfast, connect with my partner. We spend a little bit of time together in the morning, and then we go on with our days. And then my evening routine, because I'm somebody who gets like so involved in my work, and there's been so many times where I'm like, how is it 1 a.m.? I actually have alarms that go off on my phone at 8, 9, and 9:30 to remind me, like 8 o'clock, you got to start putting things away. 9:30, all tech goes away, because the lights in our phones and our tablets and our computers actually stop melatonin production. So we want to put all tech away at least an hour before bed. I usually do some stretching and sometimes take a bath, stretch or take a bath. And then I do some journaling. So just reflect on the day. Did I, looking back on my intentions, did I show up as this person? And if I didn't, what behaviors do I need to change moving forward? Do some reading, and then I meditate and fall asleep.
Do you find that's helped you? Are you one of those people that have a hard time turning off? Like if you're not distracted, you can't disconnect?
Yeah. So if I don't do my evening routine, I have a terrible sleep, and then struggle to get up in the morning and do my morning routine, which throws off my productivity for the day. So the times that my business has the most amount of growth and I have the most amount of opportunity coming to me is when my routines are on point. If my routines are off, then it just like everything else it's like a domino effect.
Yeah. So my routine doesn't even sound close to that. My evening routine is I need to watch TV, because if my brain isn't distracted, then I can't stop thinking about work or anything. I need to fall asleep being distracted by something else not related.
Yeah, so that's my fiance. For me, reading is enough. The reading and the journaling is enough. And I usually use a guided meditation to help me fall asleep. So then I'm listening to something and that's distracting me.
We're going to wrap up here. I just want to say I love having super smart, successful women on this podcast. Something I just been unable to just draw enough of to come on the podcast. I want to ask you this. If you can end here, what message do you have for female entrepreneurs out there?
That, and this is actually what my book is written on, that the most selfless thing that you can do is live your purpose and share the message that you were sent here with. And the most selfish thing that you can do is put everyone else's needs first so that you have nothing left to share your message with the world. Because yes, your kids are important. Yes, your husband or partners are important. Yes, your clients and everyone else is important. And you were still put here for a reason. There's a reason that out of 1 in 400 trillion people, you were born with your specific story, with your specific message. And all the times that you're tempted to give in to not setting boundaries or putting everybody else first, visualize the person who needs to hear your message. And that's what I do every time, whether it's self-doubt or people are like, oh, you're being so selfish by, doing all the things that you love to do. Whenever that happens, I just come back to there's somebody out there, a face in the crowd, those faces that flashed before my eyes when I was about to take that step. They need my message. They need to hear my story to make the change that they need in their life. And so if I fall prey to any of that crap that's keeping me small, they'll never change their life.
Both you and Sid, both hardworking, true entrepreneurs in every sense of the word. What's been the key to making that relationship so successful? The balance between that.
Yes, this has been the most interesting relationship I've ever been in. So we're both alphas. I've never dated a strong alpha before. Maybe that was an intentional thing. So I would say for us, there's really 2 main things to making our relationship work. One is the communication piece, because we are, I don't know if you're familiar with disc type personality typing. The D type personality is the dominant. So we have a tendency to just talk at people and move on to the next thing, and recognizing firstly, what role are we communicating to each other? And are we communicating as business partners? Are we communicating as lovers? Are we communicating as best friends? And what tone do we need to choose? Because, he's very auditory. And so if I have that direct tone, he picks up on it, even if I don't, because I'm more kinesthetic. So he picks up on it and is like, that can set him off or ruin his day. So realizing, okay, right now I'm talking to you as your business partner. Right now I'm talking to you as, your fiance, and making sure that we're clear on that. Making sure that we don't coach each other without asking for permission, because we are both in coaching roles. And then recognizing and prioritizing non-business time. When we first would go on date nights, we would have our phones with us, or, we'd be like, what do you think about this ad campaign? Or, oh, I just had this idea for ad copy. So just not going there, because then very quickly business consumes your life and you don't have anything else to talk about.
How do you guys disconnect, right? If you're having a conversation from a business standpoint, business partners, and then it's like, all right, let's go on to our date night, right? How do you make that transition?
It honestly hasn't been an easy one. And there are still times where we'll fall back into that stuff. And so what we look to focus on is, and it's like anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. We'll talk about the things that we're grateful for. We'll talk about ideas and visions that go beyond the business. So like the legacy type pieces. We will talk about things that we've learned, like, oh, I'm reading this book. We'll talk about goals. We just don't talk specific business, like, hey, we need to run this ad campaign at this. We'll talk more about like the future stuff, as opposed to what's on our current to-do list.
All right, I'm done probing into your relationship. Tiffany, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. For the listeners who want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
So probably the best way to reach me is through our Facebook group. If they go to www.successsecretsgroup.com, they can join for free there. We do a ton of free like business mindset sales training. If they want the imposter worksheet, it's www.overcomingimpostersyndrome.today. Otherwise, if you Google Tiffany Toombs, I dominate the first 5 pages, so you're good. You'll find me.
I'll link it up anyways. Tiffany, thank you so
you.
much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.